Welcome back. Today I am working on getting the spreader lights mounted on the spreaders. I was going to do some more work on the masthead, but the weather has turned exceeding cold again. It is the day after New Year's Day, and some of the shops that I need to be open are not. So I'm going to do what I can and carry on because it's boat world. So the spreader lights that I have chosen are these 6 LED outdoor lights. I think they're made for outdoor sports vehicles like trucks and ATVs and so on, but I'm using them on the spreaders. They should be okay. They're not about 15 feet, 20 feet up a mast, so they're not going to get dunked. And I'm hoping that the material that they're made out of will stand up to the relatively harsh environment that they're going to be exposed to. If not, well, they're cheap enough. It cost me $60 for 4. So the process so far has been to rivet the mounts to the spreader and then simply bolt the lights into the mounts. Sounds like a relatively simple task, but I've had a fairly interesting time of doing it. But we will persevere, get it done, and then mount the spreaders on the mast. The lights have not shown up for the mast yet, but that's the last thing that I need to put all the hardware back on, and then the mast can go back on the boat. Of course, now that it's about 1 billion below zero, the rigger won't be coming out anytime soon, but that doesn't mean that I can be slack. I need to get ready for him to show up so that when the weather does turn, we can get the job done. So let's get busy. I have basically mounted the spreader lights on the spreader with the exception of one bolt. The reason being I wanted to show you something odd. These lights are manufactured by that company, and they seem to be a fairly decent quality, but as I've been working with them, the mounts for the brackets are a solid block of aluminum, and these bolts are stainless. Some of the bolts turn in no problem, but I think probably half of them, as I've turned them in, they basically just stripped the aluminum. There's something wrong with the machining or sizing on these, and I'll show you why I would say that. These bolts are 3/8 inch bolt heads. They don't fit. Mostly kind of. Some of them do, and some of them are just a little bit too big. So I think what has happened is either they're just a very poor quality of bolt, or they've mixed standard with metric. I'm not sure what the issue is, but rather than try and rummage around and find bolts that do fit, I'm just going to grind down the head of the bolt a little bit so that it will fit in my wrench, because this one doesn't. Like I said, some of them do, and some of them don't. So there's one that fits perfectly. There's one that fits perfectly, but these ones, nope. So I just put it on the grinder a little bit on each flat, and voila, it fits. But now it's hot. Well, that's that little job done. The spreader lights are now mounted. I have to put the spreaders on the mast and wire the lights in, but that should not be too much of a problem. Famous last words. But other than that, the spreaders are ready to go back on the mast. Now, the next thing I would like to do today is with the spreader light job complete, I'm now going to turn my attention to the wiring in the mast. I've already pulled all the wire through. I've got the cable pulled and labeled. the antenna cable, the instrument pack cable. But what I have done is I have marked the cable with tape, starboard spreader lights. The obvious problem with this is just simply masking tape, and in time that tape will age and become gummy and gross, and the odds of the tape being pulled off at some point are pretty good. Now, having to open the boat up to do wiring, probably not going to be a commonplace event, but in the event that I do need to do some work on the wiring, I want to be able to figure out which wire is which. In this bundle of cables, I opted to use one color. I used black for ground, green for hot. The wiring that I pulled out of the mast, it was all nicely color coded. Each fitting on the mast had its own color: yellow, red, green, blue, and so on. But that would have meant having to buy a roll of wire of each color, which would have been very expensive and way too much wire. I wouldn't have used it all. As it was, I bought 4 rolls of wire, and I still have wire left over. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to take a page out of Mad's book. That's Mad's from Sail Life. And I'm going to label them. He got one of these, and I thought, that's a really good idea, because you can get heat shrink tubing that you can print on, which is exactly what I'm going to do next. This is actually a slick little device. Put your text in there, press print. Magic. Clip it. And voila. And these guys just fit over top of the wire. Like a little sleeve. Got some strands sticking out there. And we'll get the heat gun. And there you have it. Nice handy dandy wire labels. There's no question as to what those wires belong to. I'm going to grab another piece of heat shrink and basically tie these 2 wires together, and then I'll do that for all the other pairs. This is basically an experiment. This is I guess about 1-inch heat shrink tube. I wanted it for heavier cable and for running more than one cable through it. As you can see, the heat shrink wall is fairly thin and the inside of it is fairly thick. So I just used a short piece, a little piece, to put over 2 wires to bind them together. Right there. But what I was not anticipating was this. As the heat shrink shrank, the wall of the tube got thicker. Now that's okay. There's no problem with that, except for when I pull it through the hole in the deck. I'm going to have a whole bunch of these, as well as the instrument pack cable and the antenna cable. That will just add to the thickness that I have to pull through a relatively small hole. So I'm not going to do that on the rest of the bundle. I will just use tape. And once it's pulled into the interior of the boat, I'll remove the tape. And I might even put the heat shrink on it once it's inside, just to keep it tidy. But for now, I'm going to have to fall back to the old tape method. But I'm happy with that. It's a very well marked wire, easy to understand, nice and tidy. I'll carry on.